pandemic thing. I'm scared about getting games on Amazon. No, I meant like the
but my
weird like
probable
something's
bootleg copy that I have.
Yeah, so I'm scared.
Yeah.
But my sister's birthday's coming.
And what's nice about that is we don't know if those are exactly the rules. They're probably not.
Yeah.
And they're
I don't know, man. I've never played
because it's another small. It's good. It's basically a gateway game.
Can one of you actually?
Speak.
Never mind me.
Okay.
I will.
Is that set for
Um,
omnidirectional?
is there a switch?
Mine has a physical switch.
Yeah, right. That's.
It's got like cryptic icons that don't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think given the shape of this, yes.
Yes.
But I need to confirm it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, you testing them?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, we have enough people to play Pac-Man now.
True.
True.
Hey.
Oh, we got 4.
Yes. It's working.
Oh wow. So going all out. Heck man.
Yeah. It's like some sort of analog version of a video game. What? It's new. It just came out.
Really?
Yeah. I saw it at Target. No, like this year. Like 2019. 1999, just this year.
2019.
FCC statement. Requires batteries. Doesn't have a date on it. Trust me, it's new. Which is weird. Wouldn't it be weird? What?
August 1st, 2019.
Okay. Would it be weird if all the games that are getting turned in here were all Welcome to Dungeon?
It would
And
be.
all the ones that got turned on campus were the other ones?
Why would
Oh, okay. All right. That's okay.
Goodness.
That's right. You've got your collection bag, don't you, Vasu?
Yes, I do. This is
Yay.
the collection bag. If you have things, put them in here.
I'll pull all the names on it.
You're an idiot.
What?
I didn't put this, like, I'm not on campus. I didn't put the box outside of my lab.
But you took a picture of it.
Yeah, but the box isn't outside.
Oh.
Because I put that inside last night saying, like, oh,
There's someone on campus who can run to the office.
yeah, I think.
Oh,
I
no.
feel like when you said the thing where it's like turn it in from this day to this day, I don't think people are gonna turn it in if you're saying.
Did you give them a window?
Yeah, until tonight.
Okay.
Oh, it was until tonight.
Yeah, was it not?
I thought it said. Never mind.
So we needed to run up to
I
campus.
have to look
after
again. I
this.
thought it was till like next class.
No, I need to communicate better. But no, it was supposed to be until Wednesday night.
We'll get them. We'll get them all. Well, we got 3 of them. How many teams were there total?
Okay, so it is streaming, it is recording, and the voice is okay.
Okay. How many people are in?
There are 9 people here, and I'll be personing the chat. So Rocky says audio is very low. So let's
Okay.
make this
We can also.
shout.
Do you want to swap mics?
Yeah, let's try that. So let me try boosting the audio.
Yeah, because I've got like the gain on this microphone too.
Yeah, let's do that. I think let's not do it directionally, yeah.
I can do Omni. No. This is. Okay, I can turn up the gain too, so it can be. Recognizing the switches.
Can you hear me? Is this better? Yay! Because we can turn the gain even farther up. But ask them if it's good. Is the sound level okay if I talk like this? I'll probably talk louder.
It's better.
Okay.
Yes.
Can people hear you when you're talking from back there?
Can people hear me when I'm talking?
Awesome. Yay. Okay, this is how we're doing class for the rest of the quarter. Well, I shouldn't say we're not because we might be. Hi. So we have people turning in their games here. Batu, you want to make an update about what's happening with the box?
Yeah.
It's not in front of you.
So, hello everyone. The box might not be outside my lab because I put it inside last night and forgot to take it off because I'm here, not on campus. If the box isn't there, just put your games at the entrance of E2256 and my lab mates are going to take it in. And if you're here, put it in that little bag.
Thank you.
Do we put our mods separate from the game itself?
No, just
No,
put everything.
put them all together. Yeah.
Is
Put your mod should be with your game
Oh, okay.
as a package. Yeah.
Sweet, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so challenging to prep a class to teach this way, but I kind of like what happened. So today I'm going to talk to you about adapting games, but I'm going to talk to you about kit bashing and harvesting things from other existing board games, because that's something we haven't really talked about, and you now have some experience working with a game self-contained within itself. Maybe you brought a mechanic that you may have pulled from another game, but most likely you were just kind of working with the systems that were existing already in that game. Now you're going to be finding a video game pre-2010 or mobile game and adapting that for analog use. So part of that process will certainly be looking at that video game. I would say doing both a naive and a systems analysis of it to figure out what all the systems are in that game. But then what? Like, how do you turn those digital systems into an analog system? You should not have to start from scratch on that. There are so many mechanics that have been developed for tabletop games. You should steal them. You should. So part of this is, so adaptation has multiple meanings for this assignment. It's both adapting a video game into an analog game, but it's also adapting mechanics from other analog games to use in your analog adaptation. Does that make sense? A couple other things that Batu and I have been talking about, I think would be helpful to discuss, and we will discuss them. Chat, folks on looking at Zoom, you can chime in on chat too. Batu is watching chat actively.
Yes.
He will speak for you. So a phrase that I use a lot, if I haven't play tested a game that you've worked on with a team before, I will at some point, probably in the next quarter. A question I often ask teams as I'm looking at their games and talking about their games is, what is the fantasy of this game? And I'm always surprised at how often the answer is like, I don't know. You're moving this icon around. It's like, waiting for, yeah. Okay. Well, I've never had traffic noise to deal with in class. The fantasy of that game is that you are a monarch in charge of a kingdom, and you're making political decisions that have ramifications. That is the fantasy. The fantasy is I am the queen, I am the king, depending on which one you're playing. That is the fantasy. What would be awesome is if you pick a game to adapt, and maybe you don't duplicate the mechanics of the video game exactly, but you capture the feeling and the fantasy of that game. That's a win for us. Like, we're actually excited to see some of those games. So mostly it will be like a one-to-one where you'll figure out the systems for the video game and then find a tabletop mechanic that will kind of duplicate those systems. That is most of what's going to happen. But there may be cases where you're like, if I duplicate this mechanic on an analog game, it doesn't feel the same, but here's another completely different mechanic that we can implement analog-wise, and it actually feels like the fantasy of that game more. That's totally good. That is a positive result. Batu used a phrase when we were talking called the promise of the game. What does a game promise you? This is the fantasy of escaping from an island before it is destroyed and collecting treasure along the way. The promise is that you will have an adventure and you'll be in a fantasy place and you might die. It's also a cooperative game, so working with your friends is part of this game. Dead Ball is a baseball game that uses dice and uses like the regular stat tracking for baseball. The fantasy is you own a baseball team and you're going to play against someone else's baseball team with dice. That is the fantasy, and that is the promise. Is this is baseball?
I expected there to be zombies.
Baseball with dice. So did I.
Yeah, and it's like an empty stadium
Yes.
as well.
No, it is
Okay.
just straight up baseball. There's no death. This is called dead ball. There's no death.
Okay.
Baseball with dice. And the other thing that's surprising is it's incredibly well written. The guy who wrote it is a writer.
Okay, that's great.
But yes, the name is confusing. And he's on like his third book. There's like 3 books of this. So let me skip to another thing I want to discuss with you, kind of thinking about what game to pick. The way that you and your team will loud noises. The way that you and your team will pick the game to adapt. First of all, you're a team, so everyone on your team in your group might have a different idea about what they want to do. So you'll have to resolve that. So that's one part of this decision-making process. But you may come to this from, I have a board game that I love that I want to see if I can find a video game that would map to that we can kind of use this as a jump point. So you might start with a board game. More likely you will start with a video game that you want to adapt. But you also might come with a mechanic, like a video game mechanic that you want to try and make analog. That's another thing that might lead you to the video game to adapt. You may have a resource that you want to use. I have King of Tokyo, which has cool monsters and stuff. I might want to use that. So I might try and find a video game, Rampage, that I want to adapt because I have some existing material that I want to use. That's a totally valid reason to do this. If it will immediately improve the usability and the production value of your final product because you're going to literally harvest materials from another game, great. I added the word challenge also. Some of you may want to pick a game because it is impossible to translate into an analog game just for the challenge of trying to do this. That is a valid reason to pick a game to adapt. Please note, you may fail. So make sure that as you're looking at games to possibly adapt, that you're also making judgments about like what you can actually get done and what you can successfully do. My guess is many of the teams will probably go a little ways down the road toward trying to adapt a video game, and everyone will realize like, oh shit, no, this is bad. Or more likely, oh, we can't do this whole game, so we're just going to do this one part of the game. Like, that's totally valid as well. And then the last thing that might lead you to the game is if you have a particular skill that you want to work on that will be kind of developed and utilized in making your adaptation, that's fine too. So someone may want to make cards, may want to illustrate cards. Someone may want to do a better job at kind of balancing combat because that might be a skill that they want to grow for future use. A totally good reason. And if your team can stack up multiple things that will work for the game that you pick, so it's a video game that you like, it uses board game pieces you already have, and then someone gets to make cards and someone else gets 3D print upon like little markers, like that's all, that's fantastic. But there are many ways into this, and there will likely be some negotiation on your team. Some of you may not give a shit. Someone else can pick the game. You just want to help make it. That's also fine. Make sure your teammates know also, like, if you don't have any strong feelings about the game, that's also important information for the rest of the team to have. So they don't keep coming back to you like, what do you think? What do you want to do? What's up? If you don't care, let them know. And then it will be some combination of naive analysis and systems analysis, and also just your gut too. Someone may just have an idea that like, hear me out. I think that to adapt this video game, we might want to think about trying this. And it may not make any logical sense, but it may actually work. Prototype, take advantage of your opportunity to prototype and test things out. You've got access to basically all tabletop game genres, gameplay genres, and literary genres as well. There are board games, there are card games, there are also dexterity games. We haven't talked about dexterity games in class yet. Jenga is a dexterity game that most people are familiar with. But there's also a whole subset of tabletop games, especially in the last like 5 or 6 years. There's a Western gunfighting game called Flick 'em Up, where you're literally like flicking pieces across the table to hit other pieces. There are balance games. There's a circus game. I'm gonna find a video for it, where you're basically each round you've got a card that shows you how to stack the wooden circus performers. Whoever gets a certain height wins. Whoever gets a certain number of pieces that they use win. But it's literally just balancing little toys on top of each other. Like, so dexterity games are another type of tabletop game that you can totally use, and that might be helpful in, again, capturing the feel of a video game. If it's a twitchy video game that you have to do things like, you can also use physical games to do that. Let's talk about kit bashing. I've said the word harvesting a couple times too. Kit bashing. Does anyone know what kit bashing is? Anyone on Zoom know what kit bashing is?
William is using it for 3D.
That's fine.
And Rocky says scrounging parts to make a prototype. Yeah.
Yes. So the term, that's exactly right. So it's borrowing pieces and parts from other sources to make a new thing out of. The term kit bashing comes from visual effects model making, where originally, especially like the best examples are from movies around the age of the original Star Wars movie. If you know what a Star Wars Star Destroyer looks like, all the details along the edges of the Star Destroyer, all those little bumps and stuff on top of the Star Destroyer, that's all kit bashed. A lot of those come from like tank kits, car kits, airplane kits. They just literally pull those pieces off, and instead of making the tank, they put those little details all over another model to make it have detail. The technical term, and a lot of this is carried over into 3D modeling as well. The technical term for those little bits and pieces are greeblies if they're little tiny, and nurnies if they're bigger. That's literally what they're called in visual effects, and that is carried over to 3D visual effects. So I was in meetings when I was at ILM we were working on, I think, the second Transformers movie. I don't think I was there for the first one. And there was discussion in dailies about like, well, does the inside of Optimus Prime need more greeblies? The answer is always yes to that question, by the way. So for our purposes, it can be harvesting pieces, mechanics, tools. We're going to spend some time this morning making lists in small groups of all the different types of mechanics from board games that might be useful for us that we can use. I don't want or expect you to start from scratch on everything. Like that would miss a huge opportunity for this class, which is also now investigating how some of these systems are executed on the tabletop. What I don't want you to do is skinning. What's skinning? Yeah, so taking an existing game and basically putting a new theme outside, wrap it up in a new wrapper, and it's a new game. Here's actually a really example that a lot of people may be familiar with, King of Tokyo, which is a kaiju battling game. It's Yahtzee. It's pretty much Yahtzee with monsters. It is almost, it's got a lot of other things going on, but the core mechanic of King of Tokyo is roll 4 dice, decide which ones to keep and which ones to re-roll, That's it. So I don't want you to wholesale take a game and reskin it and say it's a video game adaptation. But if you find a core mechanic that you can use to make a different game that's an adaptation of a video game, you are welcome to do that. So you can always ask us if you're like, oh, I think we're getting to skinning territory. We're pretty much making Forbidden Island, but that's not an island. It's Monument Valley, but Forbidden Island.
Forbidden Mountain.
Yes.
You just go down and say, oh.
Places to look. So I don't expect you to all have a deep knowledge of board game mechanics. There are a lot of board games out there. There are a lot of tabletop games. I'll make a page with some links for you, but if any of you have ever been to Board Game Geek's website, they have a huge database of tabletop games, and they're all categorized. So if you're like, oh, I need a racing game, you can look on Board Game Geek and see what other racing games are out there and find similar games. Are those working?
No.
Okay.
They're on.
Okay. What's that big orange dial?
Sorry, we're trying to heat
Yeah.
ourselves up.
It's cold out here, and there's giant heaters there.
They are on.
Supposedly.
Yeah, supposedly on that. Sorry for the.
No. My goal is for you to not have to spend any money to make this. So, like, aesthetics are extra. If it's literally cut out of notebook paper with scissors and made with Sharpies, that is fine. If you want to use coins for markers, that's totally fine. But if you want to see what other things you might be able to harvest, most thrift stores, and we have a lot of good thrift stores in Santa Cruz, have old board games that might be missing pieces. Or I got a brand new copy of Drop Mix, which is Harmonix board game that you've got cards with RFID tags in them that you can mix different songs using them. It's like a $90 game. I got it for $10 at my thrift store in my town. I was so excited.
All the parts there.
Everything was there. I was like, I opened the box and it looked like it had nothing in it. I'm like, I'll take it for $10. I can harvest it for something. And then I lifted up the insert and everything was there. And it totally works. It was amazing. Yeah.
I got a copy of Pandemic, $2 at a thrift shop, and it wasn't even open.
$2 unopened Pandemic. So you should be. The trick too with thrift shops is you need to go all the time because the stuff disappears immediately. But also, like, you can assign people in your team to go different days. But go thrifting. At the very least, you'll be able to find games you can harvest, like pawns and dice and stuff from. If you do want to spend some money, there is a teacher supply store out off of 41st Avenue up near the Home Depot up there. Teacher supply stores are awesome because they sell blank dice that you can write on. They sell pawns. They sell like boards that are blank. They have dry erase dice that are these giant dice that you can literally write on with a dry erase marker and then change it all the time. So teacher supplies are awesome. You may find a game on Board Game Geek that you think has rules you could use, but it's $90. The PDF of the instructions is probably online. So if it's a newer game, especially, the rules are there. There's nothing wrong with downloading a PDF of the rules for a game that you think you're interested in just to figure out how it works. That's a fantastic resource, which is new. Yeah.
What is the name of the store that you just mentioned?
I don't know. If you look for teacher supply in or educational supply, there's also a bunch of online teacher supply stores as well. Board Game Geek also has a store. So they sell like little plastic cubes and markers and all sorts of stuff for making games. They also have like replacement parts. There's another site called The Broken Token that is all replacement parts for games. And so you can buy like one Pandemic marker for the blue guy. I'm just thinking about my sad one. This is believe it or not, this is a brand new Pac-Man game, which I think we'll look at in a minute. This is a great example of an adaptation of a video game into a board game. While I was looking for this, I discovered there is a Frogger game that came out in 1982, which I'm very excited about. The cheapest one I can find on eBay is $50 plus like $15 shipping. I love you all, but not that much right now. So I went looking for it.
Danny mentioned that the name of the store is Wonderland Toys and Classroom Resource.
Yes, exactly right. Yay! Thank you, Danny. So when I was looking for this Frogger game, I'm like, well, someone must have scanned the rules at least. So I had a moment of disappointment and a moment of excitement because there is no PDF of the rules anywhere, but I found the patent for the game from 1982. It is a 6-page patent document that has an outline of like, what are all the parts? How do they work together? I will post it on Canvas. It's amazing. It had never occurred to me to go looking for patent documentation for board games. They don't all include all of the rules, but it's really interesting. I don't know about our public library that's down here, but the Scotts Valley Public Library has a huge board game library that you can check out board games. My quest for the next year at UCSC is to convince our libraries that we should have a board game library that you can check out games. It is not going to happen soon enough for you. But hopefully it will happen because it's ridiculous that we have 2 game design programs and no way for you to check out games except for go to the game lab. Hope there's a game you want there. Yeah, we have lots of video games. No physical game. And then the other resource that you should not forget about, and I'm going to try not to sign my fellow faculty up for too many questions from you, but a lot of your faculty have played a lot of board games and tabletop games and know a lot about them. Elizabeth Swenson hosts board games every quarter for the other faculty at her office, and we play every week. She's always there. She has a ton of games. I have a ton of games. Nathan obviously has a lot of Japanese board games, but Nathan knows a lot about board games in general. Chrissy Gobluski Davis, who runs the Digital Scholarship Commons downstairs in McHenry, she knows a ton about tabletop games. So if you're like, oh, we want to adapt this video game, but we're looking for something that has a mechanic like this, like one of us might know a game that has that, or at least can point you in a direction. Like, don't forget about us. Also, your TAs. All of the TAs, most of the TAs are interested in tabletop games as well as digital games, and I see lots of activity amongst the TAs playing games. And each other, like, help each other. You've all played games that no one else has played in this class. Many of you played games, most of you played a game that I've never played. And then there are lots of online board game reviewers and designers who post about games. Shut Up and Sit Down is a fantastic review show. They talk a lot about mechanics of games. But also Jamie Stegmeyer, who is the designer of Scythe, and his company released Wingspan, which just came out and just won the Spiel des Jahres in Essen. He posts every week on YouTube his favorite game mechanic. And he will talk about a game mechanic that he loves for 15 minutes. And he's got like dozens and dozens and dozens of them. So there are designers who are also posting stuff about game mechanics all the time.
To add on to that,
yeah,
Reddit is a good resource.
Oh, yeah.
I know some threads and I'm going to share them. That is about what are your favorite game mechanics from board games, which is a really compilation plus a discussion about the series of board games. And more importantly, over game mechanic example games. So it's a very like nice and actionable resource. I'll add that to the list that we're going to compile and publish on Canvas. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that didn't even occur to me.
It's good.
Reddit has positive things on it too.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Another thing too is I wanted to talk to you about scope both of the games that you're choosing to adapt and the games that you're looking to for inspiration or to steal mechanics from. So try not to pick too big a game, or pick a subset of a game, a subsystem of a game, a smaller part of a game to adapt. But also, when you're looking for games to harvest from, don't pick the biggest game possible. So if you need to do tactical tabletop and you want to make an old-timey XCOM turn-based video game into a tabletop game, like, don't jump straight to Warhammer 40K. Find something smaller. This is Frostgrave, which is a bring-your-own miniatures tabletop tactical war game, fantasy-based. You can use whatever miniatures you have. So if you've got a bunch of D&D miniatures, great. You don't need to buy any terrain. You don't need to buy anything. And the mechanics are pretty straightforward and simple. It's like D&D light combat, but makes more sense than D&D combat from a tactical standpoint. Some of you who had me for 80K, I mentioned in that class Fuzzy Heroes, which is a tactical battlefield game using stuffed animals for kids. Super simple rule set. It's not free. It's like $6 PDF. And then there's Brick Wars, which is basically tactical tabletop war gaming with Legos. That one's free. Yeah.
William and his team is planning on porting World of Warcraft, making a massively multiplayer offline board game.
Sure.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be great. So someone will have to be the server. So make sure you have a complete rule set for the server. And then you'll want different servers for different regions of the world. And they'll need a way to talk to each other, maybe walkie-talkies. As a thought experiment, it's kind of fun. But I think someone was talking about Mario Kart, a racing game.
Okay.
So this is Snowtails. This is a dog sledding game. It does an incredibly good job of capturing the theme and the fantasy of driving a dog sled around a track. It's got really cool mechanics for cornering and for using your multiple dogs. Also, the dogs all have their own stats. So you can put together different teams. Some of you may be familiar with a game called Flamme Rouge, which is a bicycle racing game from France. Is it from France? It's about a French race. It's also got really good race mechanics. So if you're thinking about adapting a racing game, there are lots of tabletop racing games that will work to like find out how they do it. This one we happen to have a copy of that you can borrow if you'd like to. It's really fun. But this is also, again, a good example of a game that evokes the fantasy really well. Part of that is kind of the next thing I want to talk about, which is if you can find mechanics that help reinforce the fantasy of your game, that is always like a force multiplier for the experience for the player. A really good example of that is Welcome to Your Perfect Home. This is confusingly, it's a roll and write, but you don't roll anything. It's got cards, and you're basically, everyone gets a sheet with a neighborhood. They're all the same. And depending on what cards get flipped over, you're trying to build houses by putting numbers on them, and you get scored for, there's like 6 different interlocking systems here. It's really good. It takes a while to learn how to play. But what I like about it is, what's the fantasy of this game? You're like trying to make the best neighborhood. So it's kind of architect, city planner. The way that you interact with this game is by using, I would say don't use a pen. Use a pencil to draw lines on a piece of paper like an architect or a city planner would. Like there's something about the mechanic of drawing lines on a piece of paper that reinforces the fantasy of this game in a really nice way. If this game was played with a little dry erase board, I don't think it would be as good because that would be a missed opportunity to kind of reinforce the fantasy. Someday, I'm going to have to figure out how to do this. You can play, there is no upper limit to how many people can play this game.
This is 1 to
1 to 100.
You can play by yourself?
And that's only limited by the number of sheets in this box.
Okay.
Yes, and you can play solo because the cards are going to come up as they come up. If there are other people playing, you win against their score. You can also play just based to get the best score that you can. In theory, I could be flipping these cards in the front of the media theater on the overhead projector with 300 students in 80K all playing along at the same time. The rules are just a little too complicated to kind of quickly get across in lecture. Maybe play it the week before in section.
We can do that.
And then everyone plays at once in lecture.
Yeah.
I mentioned that on Twitter last year, and the developer of this game got super excited. They were like, please let us know how that goes. I was like, please send me 300 sheets. Send me extra pads. So think about if there are ways that you can tweak your game so that the theme, the fantasy, the promise of the game is reinforced by your mechanics. Okay, I've been talking a lot. What questions, comments?
Are there any questions on Zoom? Any questions not on Zoom? But in Captain Cloud?
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about how Snowtails does racing?
Yeah. So,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, so he wanted to know if we can talk a little bit more about how Snowtails does racing. Oh, look, Past Tad put everything in nice little plastic containers inside. Past Tad is a good game owner. So there are cards in Snowtails that had numerical values on them. And you stack them up in different ways when you want to make a maneuver. It's been a while since I played. So what's nice is the way that you play it, if any of you have done, even if you've done like track and field in elementary school, high school, you know that the distance that you cover on the inside of an elliptical track or any kind of curved track is different than the outside. That's why the starts for a race are staggered in a diagonal line across. Same thing here, but also cornering is different than going straight. So you have to, there's also momentum. So you have to decide what you're going to do that turn. You play your cards. So some of the cards are about turning. Some of the cards are about using different dogs to turn. And some of them are about going forward. You're committed to whatever that is. So if someone gets in front of you in the next turn by mistake, there's also some randomness to it. You could crash into a tree. And then you need to start over again and move. It's fairly intricate. But you actually have pieces for the dogs, and the dogs have different stats as well. Be good to play this again and get a refresher on how this works. All I remember is we were shocked at how well it worked the last time we played it. It was just like, this should not work as well as it does. And when I saw the review of Flamme Rouge, they were just so excited about how well it captured the mechanics of bicycle racing, and made a game that should not on paper be fun. What would be fun about an activity like riding a bike and making it into a board game? That seems dumb, but it can work. It can work for sure. So wait, what year did SSX came out? You could do SSX board game. Ooh, someone please make an SSX board game.
2000s, yes. You can definitely make an SSX.
Excellent.
What does SSX stand for? Snowboarding Super
Extreme.
Extreme.
Yep, correct.
Is it? Wait, is that?
It is.
It is now.
Extreme. I think it is. Because like X Games.
Yeah.
But EA doesn't own X Games, so they can make their own. Other questions? So I want to have folks, and Zoom folks also, I want to take some time to split up for like 15 minutes in small groups of like 3 or 4 and make lists of every tabletop mechanic / tool that you can think of, dice for creating random numbers, bags with tiles inside. Like, just first make the list of all the things you can think of, all the tools that board games use to do anything. Pawns, markers, there's a jillion things. I want to see if I can have you guys help make a definitive list of those things. So bonus is, how are they used in games? Like, what is their function? What part of the system are they performing? It might be input, it might be output, it might be, there probably is some sort of data related to that. What is that? But at the very least, I'd love to have a big list that we can use of all the tools at our disposal, and think as broadly as you can about all the games you've ever played or heard of and things that they do. Even if it's like, I think I saw someone playing this game that had like a spinner, but it wasn't a spin. Like, we'll track it down. So it is now 10 o'clock. Let's only take like 10 minutes. Batu, should we have people just post in the chat, or should we have them like direct message you?
Yeah, I think direct message me is good. I'm going to write written instructions here.
Okay. So the only thing you require is something to write down things on. Can be phone, that's fine. Get in groups of like 3, 6, not 3 or 4, based on the number of people. Come back at 10:10, and we'll make our big list. You can go inside where it's warm. You can begin your conversation in line, getting a coffee if you'd like. But come back here in 10 minutes at 10:10 with a list of board game mechanics, tools, things that board games, tabletop games use as mechanical features. Does that make sense? Okay, go.
It is too chilly.
What?
Please don't leave Zoom. We're going to use Zoom's. Okay, go.
Can you pause? Will the meeting stay open if you leave?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Let me just.
How's your battery?
We're good.
Okay. I'm gonna get a coffee. Do you need another one, Batu?
No, I'll just come with you.
Any more?
No, like reusable cards. No, like you want to right now. Like you want to right now.
Yeah, play. Yeah.
We don't talk about it in the last 10 years. Okay, in the last 20 years. I think that's it.
I thought I recognized that hair. How you doing? You know the
I've never seen games use it.
I think I saw Game
Oh my terrible person.
Game with it where you come with getting bored to
If I
two pictures or something.
chaos.
My wife could do this. Nice.
And it also is like the church aliens.
Operation.
Oh, easier.
It's a lot of work to take off.
Liquids. So, you know, they don't have.
Oh my god.
I think they deserve to spot. That might be the same thing, but I know there's a lot of games including Chris have like a piece of
Yeah, they're almost
distinct from the actual timer.
like every other business.
Yeah, like this guy's too. Guys. Legacy games might have something.
It's like because you only be able to use it once. Yeah.
You'll know which one it is.
What if you can just won't show up to class. So I said things like, "Oh, you
That was an interesting.
Did we learn things?
Yeah, alcohol could be considered as one, I guess.
We didn't talk about drinking things.
Yeah, I looked at my phone and I saw chess, but with shots. And I was like, that just increases difficulty and immobilizes.
Batu is rousting. I think we got everybody. This on? Okay. We need like a light that says now. So
Blinking.
okay, so we were just discussing alcohol is a mechanic. Because we know about it's X game plus you take a shot. Did you say it was chess?
Yeah, it was chess with shots.
Chess with shot. So when you take a piece, the person has to do a shot?
Or if you like, I mean, I don't know. That was the image I saw, but I've played Battle
my
Shots
dad had
before,
that
which
game.
is Battle
It
Shots.
was like the board was like glass and the shot glasses with peace like signs on them.
In Russia?
So like yeah, and they would like it would literally fill the shot glasses with booze. And you would play with shot glasses.
I want to make this game.
An easy one is Battle Shots, which is Battle Shots.
Battle shots, battleship with shots.
And Chad is also agreeing that alcohol is for sure a mechanic, and Red Dragon Inn apparently is a game. It's a mechanic in Russia, possibly. And yeah, people
Okay.
enjoy alcoholic.
Well, this discussion's off to a great start. Wow. Okay. So we're going to table that. I also made like a note to myself, like, I haven't been thinking at all about drinking games in general, like as a subset of games. I don't think we'll be replacing ADI with a drinking games class anytime soon. Maybe as an elective. No, I would surely get fired.
prerequisite for the class is 21.
You need to have, yes, you
You
need to
just
have
need
an
to see the
ID.
age, that's it.
The prereq is you must have an ID that proves you're 21 years old. Also, you need to prove that you have a ride home from class, or you're walking back to your dorm. Okay, so I think we will probably make a way for you all to for us to have a shared document where we can just kind of put all these things. But let's start by just kind of talking about the kinds of things that you came up with. Which group wants to start? Yeah. What kind of things are on your list?
Well, there's the obvious ones like dice, tiles, game pieces.
Dice, tiles, pieces,
And then we said pawns.
pawns.
Would be a little different. The spinners, like in like Game of Life.
Yep.
Grab bags, like the Scrabble.
Yep.
Blocks, like Jenga.
Oh yeah.
Tops that
Tops.
you spin.
Battle tops. Wait.
Yeah.
Let's do another. I don't want you to use all of them. What's happening in chat?
Not yet, but the question right now is, can you please share the things that you...
So dice, tiles, pieces, pawns, which might be different than pieces, spinners, grab bags, blocks like Jenga, tops like battle tops, and I'm sure there are other top-based games.
I just wanted to add, we also wrote here that game pieces themselves can include a lot of different things.
Yes.
Because it could be like a house, it could be like the tokens, it could be anything basically. It could be a different thing, but it would do the same mechanic as tracking a resource.
Many types of pieces, and yes, so pieces as a pieces can be used for presenting data, for holding data. So whether a property in Monopoly has a house on it or a hotel, that piece is actually a data display device and a data storage device. There are lots of examples of game pieces that have that kind of data display mechanic. There's a lot of games have a whose turn is it piece. So just to help everyone remember, like who went first this round, especially complicated games.
David is talking about borders.
Yes.
So physical representations that can be used, like in Kart.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, borders. Like the hexagons in Catan. And then also roads and other resource tokens, and especially in Euro games for sure. What else? What? Oh, your voice. That's a great one. Yeah.
There's deck storage of cards, and that is used in Dominion and Magic.
Yeah. So storage of decks. So a deck of cards is different than an individual card. There's a discard deck, which is different than a deck where you're drawing cards from. In in collectible card games, you come to the game with a deck that you have created. In Keyforge, you get the weird, randomly generated by an algorithm card deck that is unique. But also, that is an important thing. Orientation of cards, which we talked about a little bit with Magic, that a sideways tapped card, just the position of the card on the table holds different data, means something different. The different ways that we arrange decks of cards, again, with a discard deck, a common discard deck. You can also have, like a Monopoly deal, you've got your bank stack of cards is different than your property stacks of cards. So the same, and in Monopoly deal, the same card can have different functions. It could be money or it could be a property.
In the chat, David is mentioning timers. They can add
Timers!
Stress. That's a big one. That's a really good one. Adding stress, and escape is an example of that. And Highland is talking about just the map layout, describing how the game is played.
Yeah.
Just the general map, which is very fundamental. And Ethan mentioned that they talked about wordplay, just language in addition to the voice, like just word aspects of it. And Scrabble and Cards Against Humanity, so things that you can put down. Yeah, those are really good. And also
a lot.
Physical ideas of just taking the ball, that's like in a playground game type of things. It's also another idea, the physicality aspect of it.
Yeah, so ownership of a piece of cards can change throughout a game. There are card games where you give each other cards. One of my favorite things about Sushi Go is the fact that you pass your hand around and you know what it looked like when it left you, and you know how many people have had that and what cards have been playing, but you don't know exactly what it's going to look like when it comes back to you and you're trying to make decisions. Hidden information is a huge mechanic.
Yes.
And public information is a huge mechanic. What other things?
Talking about marbles.
Oh yeah.
There's like
marbles,
physical contraptions like a mousetrap.
Yes, contraptions.
Yeah, and then we also put like electronic accompaniments.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays, like there was a physical game I played once where it's like kind of like a beat game where you have cards and you put them on a deck and it generates beats.
That's Drop.
Is that
Drop Mix? That's
that
the
what
one
it's
I got for $10.
Bop it. You
Bop
pass
it.
around.
So yeah, there could be electronic, like Simon. Wait, is Simon a board game or is it? I think it's an electronic game. I don't expect any of you to make an app.
Let's adapt it.
It's a physical space on its own.
Yeah.
It's a board game for now.
But it's a good liminal case. Like also, like Operation. Operation is an electronically assisted game. It is simply just completing a circuit and horrifying you beyond belief when it buzzes at you. Yeah.
What about Jackbox games? They play like board games.
Yeah.
Jackbox games? Well, those are clearly computer games. It is, and depending on which one, many of them are adapted from analog games, like Trivial Pursuit, or like a pub trivia game. But I would say that it depends, because there's so many different Jackbox games, too.
One thing that happens in Jackbox is drawing, and that's what Glenn mentions. Drawing is actually another game.
Yeah.
And in the chat, so physical space came up once again, but in this case, Danny mentioned that just positioning one's body is like in Twister.
Oh, yeah.
Move around and stretch. There is some conversation about randomness. So like flipping coins, rolling dice, all that bit, that came from Kaylin. And one thing that was also good from Danny is Mao, which is a game about people not knowing the rules. So just the concept of not knowing rules is a mechanic. And finally, Billy mentioned the game I think you mentioned earlier about stuffed animals. So just like arbitrary objects being rolled into the game space and being incorporated. And yeah.
There's a book that I think we got a copy of. It just came out within the last couple months. I didn't buy a copy because I believe it's $100. And it is just an encyclopedia of exactly what we're talking about. I will see if I can put it on the reserve desk for us. I wanted to withhold that information until the right moment, but it's hundreds of pages of this stuff. and an attempt to kind of codify it. It's overwhelming.
A department purchase?
I would think so. I think Bennett bought a copy for AGPM, but it's at McHenry. I'll find out. It does seem like we should have a couple copies on reserve for us all the time.
I have a question. So people already talked about the like map layouts and stuff. But what like separate dedicated terrain pieces be different as a mechanic?
Do you mean like for a tabletop skirmish game?
Well, for example, like Warhammer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I back in Russia, I've been hanging out with people who were obsessed with Warhammer, and they would like literally construct terrains.
Yes, I have friends. I may have some terrain at my house that I've been building for Star Wars Legion out of food containers. Yes, terrain for sure. Some games like Warhammer have specific layouts that you can duplicate. So Star Wars Legion and Imperial Assault, some other types of tabletop turn-based combat games, like A, sometimes they want you to buy the terrain from them. But B, like Frostgrave's a good example. Like you can make terrain out of whatever you want. Like you can literally just cut out a piece of cardboard or just use boxes. But it's terrain is important because it has strategic value for tabletop skirmish games for sure.
And the flip side of terrain is like rulers and distance.
Yes!
Because not every game is played on a grid, even though most games are.
Yeah.
And one thing that we haven't mentioned is, I think destruction is an interesting one. What I mean by that is when you're playing legacy games, sometimes what you do is you like literally destroy certain pieces.
Yes.
And that feels so satisfying.
Yes.
And in addition to that is fire. So in some games, or one game that I know of is 10 Candles. It's an RPG role-playing game, so it's a little bit different. But in that game, in order to enact certain abilities, to literally burn the cards, and it feels so good. So fire, I think, can be added to those.
Fire. I think that's in the same column as alcohol.
Maybe
but yeah, destroying pieces. Also, we haven't talked about legacy games in which you permanently alter the pieces in the board depending on decisions you make as you play from session to session. You have a lot of things available to you, and I want you to feel free to use whichever ones work for you. And you will definitely have choices to make. There may be 4 or 5 different ways that you can solve a system problem. Which one are you going to do? Well, we have the thing already. Decision made. We don't have the thing. We don't have a spinner. Great. Oh, we can make a spinner. Okay. Oh, wait. We have cards and we have dice. Maybe I'll do a little talk about randomization and dice and the huge amount of variability you can have in weighting randomness using different combinations of dice and cards as well. Maybe. Yes.
What's the size of dice?
The side, like how many sides a dice has?
Size.
Like the physical size? Probably. If physics are involved with dice, it's very hard to get an evenly weighted die. That's why sometimes people have their quote lucky die. It's the one that's weighted so that they roll 20s more often.
And on the note of like physicality, David mentioned that a game called Escape uses the table, and if you drop the dice off the table,
yes,
it's lost.
Yeah,
it's really cool and interesting.
That is almost. There's a dexterity component to that. Yeah. If a piece, having a rule that if a piece goes off the table or out of a certain region of the board, it has an effect, which is it's lost.
So wait, what happens if you lose all the dice? You lose?
Probably.
There are some interesting games that actually use dice as the tokens that you can stack up dice to make different characters and do different things with the dice themselves as markers. Dice as counters for sure. Counting tracks along victory to collect like victory points as another way to track time. Forbidden Island, like you've got the flooding track. We're out of time.
Oh, shucks.
Well, for those of you who are here, I'm here all day teaching and having office hours and stuff. So if you want to hang out and chat, we can do that. How many did we wind up with on Zoom today?
So we reached 20 people on Zoom at some point.
Okay.
Now we're at 16. So that
Okay.
gives us 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30 people.
Plus, people will watch the recording.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think this was a success. Thanks to everyone who came. Thanks for everybody who tuned in with Zoom.
Yeah, thank you very
Yay! We will make a big document.
Yes.
I almost feel like it should just be a big Google Doc where
Yeah.
we collect all this stuff.
Yeah. And people can add on to it
Yeah.
after the fact.
It
Yeah.
should be a living document. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you very much.
You can do like Google Sheets. That might be easier to write in. Maybe. Never mind.
I have this weird thing where I don't like using spreadsheets for not math.
Really?
But I should let go of that because it's dumb. Because everyone uses
Yeah.
Excel and Sheets for everything because it does keep things nice and organized. Maybe we'll.
Because it's Google Docs, it could just get like
It does.
It could go up to 26 pages.
It can. Well, maybe as long as I think the trick with Sheets, just make sure you set up so like it does word wrap and stuff, and so
Yeah.
that it doesn't.
Or like merge stuff. Yeah.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
Maybe you'll conquer your fear.
Maybe I'll come to you and ask for help.
That's all I do at my